Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. My name's Julie Willis. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning here at the University of Melbourne, and I'm also a co-director of ACAHUCH, which is presenting today's symposium. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded lands on which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples. We pay respects to elders past, present and future, and recognise the importance of Indigenous knowledges within the Academy. It's my absolute delight to open this symposium, which is really talking about a critical issue, affordable housing options, but thinking about it from how it has developed since post-Second World War. And we've got a stellar lineup of speakers, and I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting day. That's all you're going to hear from me, because Philip is going to come and talk in more detail about the symposium.
Thanks. Yes. Thanks very much, Julie. So I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work, learn and live here on the Parkville campus of the University of Melbourne, the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples. We pay respects to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy here. As a community of researchers, teachers, professional staff and students, we're privileged to work and learn every day with Indigenous colleagues and partners. And to add to Julie's welcome, on behalf of my fellow co-directors of the Australian Centre for Architectural History, Urban and Cultural Heritage, ACAHUCH, here at the University of Melbourne, Professors Julie Willis and Hannah Louie, I'd like to welcome everybody here and everyone online to the 8th ACAHUCH Symposium. And we're really thrilled that the ACAHUCH Symposium has become a regular feature of our calendar. I'm going to do a few thank yous too before we begin, because in preparing for this year's symposium, from the very beginning, I really need to acknowledge the great work of Theo Blankley, whose organisational skills and collaboration have made convening this event seamless, and I hope for our visiting speakers too, a pleasure to plan and execute. I'd also like to thank Julie and Hannah for their support and agreeing to my perhaps too occasional focus on post-war Australian architecture. Thanks also to Basil from the university's event services team for managing the audio and media for this event. This is the first time we've used audio for one of these things, and we're hoping it's a big improvement. I'd also like to acknowledge that this event has been made possible by ACAHUCH, but particularly through the support of Dr. Richard Simi and the Jock Simi Architectural History, Urban and Cultural Heritage Research Fund, which assisted in the formation and running of this symposium. On practical matters, we'll be providing lunch and 2 afternoon teas and drinks afterwards. Bathrooms are directly opposite the Japanese room for our guests as well, if you don't know already. All the papers presented today are being videoed and recorded and will be made available online after the symposium. Now, last year in 2022, David Nichols and Catherine Townsend convened the ACAHUCH Symposium with the theme of Park Life, an investigation into the histories, Indigenous, social, architectural and urban of Parkville, as a way of celebrating the 50-year anniversary of the founding of the Parkville Association. This year, 2023, the focus is on affordable housing in a crisis, seen through the lens of housing production through prefabrication. Now, the story of housing provision in post-war Australia has frequently been described through accounts of speculative house providers, project home builders and one-off architect-designed houses. Stories drawn largely by the private sector's shaping of market demand and suburban domestic taste. And missing is the story of the search for affordable housing options required in times of special need and unusual demand, as Australia's urban, regional and remote communities grew after World War II. Housing shortages, national and state-based infrastructure projects, social housing, the influx of a migrant labour force, mining and extraction, Cold War defence projects, and housing for First Nations peoples were just some of the circumstances that demanded different solutions, often with the caveat of cost control, high production numbers, and speed of erection. One tactic to meet these demands was to turn to an alternative mode of delivery, the machine-made house, either fully fabricated or pre-cut as a kit of parts, and produced in significant numbers and transported across the country. Today, at a time when Australia faces an acute shortage of housing across urban, regional, and remote communities, it's a perfect time, I believe, to critically reflect on the successes and the failures of the machine-made house in post-war Australia. And today's papers do just that. So the day has been broken into 4 parts. We're going to be hearing shortly a keynote presentation by Emeritus Professor Miles Lewis, which will contextualise the political and production scene nationally during and after World War II. And then we'll have 3 sessions devoted to Commonwealth, state, and remote solutions, given by guest speakers from interstate, overseas, and from colleagues here within the MSD. The booklet details each speaker's abstract and also their biography, so I encourage you to read these as we move through the program, and there's also space in the booklet for you to take notes. Now, in just one day, we cannot hope to fully encompass the breadth and diversity of housing and prefabrication in Australia's post-war decades. But the aim really of this symposium is to open up this subject to new interpretations, make clear connections that are transnational in scope in terms of technologies, labour and migration, and expose the challenges faced by politicians, policymakers, architects, planners, and also residents in dealing with questions of industrialising the provision of housing. That many of these schemes deal with the greater landscape of Australia and its remaking after World War II is no accident. That many of these schemes have resounding echo today is also no accident, and that helps explain why examining a subject like this makes so much sense. So now to today's keynote speaker. Emeritus Professor Miles Lewis is an architectural historian, known to many of you. He specialises in the cultural history of technology. His book Architectura was published internationally in 2009 in 5 languages, uniquely for an Australian work in this field. He's an honorary life member of the Comité International d'Architecture Vernaculaire and a fellow of the Australian Academy of Humanities. More than 20 years ago, he was made a member of the Order of Australia for services to architectural history, heritage protection and urban planning, particularly through policy development and professional organisations. He received the Centenary Medal the next year in 2003 for service to Australian society and the humanities in the study of architectural history. He's an honorary life member of Australia ACAHUCH, the Society of Architectural Historians Australia and New Zealand, and the National Trust of Australia. Now, Miles is the acknowledged expert on prefabrication here in Australia. His knowledge in this field is without peer, and it's an honour to have him present here this morning, just a few days before your birthday, I understand, Miles. So happy birthday. And so it's a great honour to be able to have Miles launch this symposium. So please welcome Professor Miles Lewis.